Can one woman's voice demoralize millions of American soldiers? But what if that same voice secretly warns them? The woman in this photograph knows the real story behind history's most dangerous radio broadcasts. If you also have untold stories about war within your family, please write to our email address.
I am Mary Nakamura, and this is my story. Every word I will tell you is real, lived behind that radio microphone during those dark days, as a girl born on American soil. Raised on the sunny streets of Los Angeles, I never thought I would find myself on enemy territory. In December 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor changed our lives completely. That Sunday morning we were worshiping with our family at the Methodist Church in Los Angeles. The news from the radio shocked the entire congregation. I was only 19 years old that day, my long black hair falling to my shoulders, typing my university assignments with my small hands on typewriter keys. My eyes were almond-shaped, carrying my mother's Japanese origin beauty, but my heart was completely American. I was studying journalism at UCLA, and my dream was to work at one of the United States' biggest newspapers. On campus I had my boyfriend Robert Thompson. This tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy was planning to marry me. Every afternoon we would sit on the grass in front of the library and talk about our future. He would tell me, "Mary, you're going to be America's best journalist," and I would squeeze his strong hands and reply, "Yes, Robert, we'll build big dreams together." My mother, Grace Nakamura, was a second-generation Japanese-American woman born in California. Short, gracefully postured, and always someone who harmonized traditional values with modern life. She would cook American meals in the kitchen but apply Japanese etiquette rules at the table. On Sunday afternoons after church, she would sit under the rose trees in our garden and tell me stories of the first Japanese immigrants in California. 3 weeks after the Pearl Harbor attack, our lives were completely turned upside down. Our neighbors began looking at us with suspicion. My friends at university distanced themselves from me. Even my boyfriend Robert had to end his relationship with me under pressure from his family. In those days, my father was constantly worried. He would sit silently at dinner, check the windows. My mother Grace spent more time praying at home, shedding tears while listening to radio news. My brother James, 16 years old, was the star of the basketball team, but he no longer wanted to go to school because the other children there called him enemy child. One night, just as we were preparing to visit my uncle in San Francisco, everything changed. My father and I had boarded the train. My tall, broad-shouldered father, William Nakamura, was an honorable man who had served in the United States Army during World War I. His hair was beginning to gray. The wrinkles on his face told of life's hardships. The war medal he still carried on his left chest was proof of his loyalty to America. I had fallen asleep on that train. When I woke up, I found myself in a completely different place. The 2 weeks on the ship were a nightmare for me. Hundreds of people were living crammed together on deck. The food was insufficient. Hygiene conditions were terrible. Next to me was a woman named Emily Watanabe in her 30s. She was a teacher in Seattle. At nights we would cry together, sharing our hopes. When we arrived in Japan, they took me to a large building in the center of Tokyo. The building looked ordinary from the outside, but inside it was filled with modern radio studios. We took the elevator to the 6th floor. The corridors were silent and soldiers were standing guard everywhere. The rooms were small but clean. Each had a single bed, a small table and a sink. A man named Commander Sato greeted me. This short, thin-framed, bespectacled man treated me kindly when I first saw him. But in the depths of his eyes there was a cold determination. Next to him was a young man named Hiroshi who worked as an interpreter. This young man had been educated in America and spoke perfect English. According to what he told me, he was born in California but brought to Japan as a child. In the first weeks they didn't force me at all. They just wanted me to rest, eat and get stronger. They gave me 3 regular meals a day. They even allowed me to read books. But every day I was called to Commander Sato's office and asked questions about America for hours. Which cities I had lived in, what I studied at university, who in my family worked in which jobs. At the end of the second week, they revealed their real plans. The plan they explained to me was very simple. I would make demoralizing broadcasts to American soldiers. If I refused, they said my father and other family members in America would die. They showed me photographs of our house in Los Angeles, pictures of my mother taken as she left the market. I understood that they were watching our every move. For a week before my first broadcast, they made me prepare. The sound technician Kenji taught me how radio equipment worked, microphone use, breathing techniques, adjusting voice tone. Kenji was a kind but determined person. He constantly told me American soldiers will listen to your voice, you must seem trustworthy to them. In the first days I couldn't even dare to sit in front of the microphone. My hands were shaking, my voice wouldn't come out. The studio room was a small room. The walls were covered with soundproof materials, inside was always dimly lit. There was only one chair in front of the microphone and I sat in that chair. Behind the glass partition, the technical team was watching me. Every day we started broadcasting at exactly 14 o'clock. The first texts they gave me were very simple. They started like, "Dear American soldiers, this is Tokyo Radio. We bring you news from your homes, from your loved ones." Then came sentences aimed at demoralizing American soldiers. They wanted me to say that their wives weren't waiting at home, that the war was meaningless, that they wouldn't return home. I had to read every word carefully, deliver it emotionally. For the first week I just read these texts, but starting from the second week, I began to notice different things. There was a large world map hanging on the studio wall. American units' positions were marked on this map. These markers changed every day. New information came. Radio broadcasts weren't just propaganda. They were also used to get location information from American soldiers. At the end of my third week I realized that American soldiers were really listening to me. According to information I got from the technical team, many bases in the Pacific were following my broadcasts. They weren't just listening, they were paying attention to the content of my broadcasts. Some unit commanders were making strategic changes after my broadcasts. That's when that idea came to me. I began to start squeezing secret messages into the texts they gave me while reading them. For example, when I said, "Dear American soldiers, the weather is very nice today," I actually meant enemy planes aren't coming. When I said, "Your families have forgotten you," I was trying to convey the meaning your families miss you but are safe. I began to transmit simple messages I wrote in Morse code with my voice tone, with emphasis. As months passed, this system became more complex. I was creating messages by combining the first letters of certain words, with sentences like, "Today Tokyo is very cold. Planes are circling in the sky. Mines are waiting on the shore." I was giving codes like TTVCPCMW. Only careful listeners could solve the meaning of these codes. At the end of my 6th month, I noticed that Commander Sato was beginning to look at me with suspicion. One morning he came to my room early. That day I felt scared for the first time. He was walking around the room with his thin build, studying me from behind his glasses. He started asking me questions. He wondered why I emphasized certain words differently, why I sometimes paused. I tried to act as natural as possible. I told him that my American accent was natural, that I spoke this way. Fortunately, he believed it, or pretended to believe it. In my 9th month one night, while walking silently in the corridor, I heard conversations from Commander Sato's room. The door was slightly ajar and I could hear 3 people's voices from inside. They were talking about how American soldiers listened to my broadcasts very carefully, that some of their units were even acting according to my warnings. They were saying that an attack they had planned on an island in the Pacific had been cancelled, that the reason for this might be the broadcast I made that day. At that moment I thought my heart would stop. I had been discovered. I immediately returned to my room and couldn't sleep all night. When I was called to breakfast early in the morning, this time they showed me a different room. 5 people were sitting around a large table, Commander Sato, interpreter Hiroshi and 3 other officers I didn't know. Many cassettes recording my voice were on the center of the table. They told me to sit quietly. Then they played one of the cassettes, first my normal reading, then the version passed through voice analysis devices. They had examined my sound waves, detected which words I paused on, how I emphasized which letters. Right then they put a file on the table. Inside were American unit movements, tables compared with my broadcast times. The next morning, 3 soldiers came to my room. They took me to the interrogation room. This room was empty. There was only one chair in the middle, with large projectors around it. The light from these projectors was so strong I couldn't open my eyes. They interrogated me for Hours my hands were handcuffed behind me, my feet were swollen. The first day the interrogation lasted 6 hours. The second day 8 hours. The third day exactly 12 hours. Every time they asked the same questions. Who I worked with, which codes I used, how I communicated with American intelligence. But I didn't confess anything. I said I only read the texts given to me, that I didn't do anything else. Because technically I wasn't lying. I really was just reading those texts, but how I read them was different. At the beginning of my 12th month, they moved me to another building. This time the conditions were much harder. The building was old and neglected, my room's window was broken, the heating system wasn't working. They gave me only one meal a day, and that was mostly rice soup and some vegetables. My room was very cold. At nights I tried to sleep by pulling my blanket over my head, but I continued to maintain my broadcasts. Because I knew that there, far away, there were American soldiers listening to my voice and I could help them. Now I had to be more careful. I made my codes more complex, made my messages shorter and more concise. Sometimes I even used silence as code. The pause durations that came after certain words carried different meanings. During this period a new guard came, named Samuel, about 60 years old, an elderly American soldier. I learned that he too had been taken prisoner like me. He had been captured in the Philippines at the beginning of the war, tall, white-haired, with a war wound on his left leg. Samuel began talking to me. At first I was very careful, but over time I understood that he was a real American soldier. He told me about his house in Boston. He said he had been married to his wife Martha for 50 years. That they had 3 children and 7 grandchildren. Samuel began listening to my broadcasts. At first he was just curious, but later he realized that I wasn't just doing propaganda. One day he quietly approached me and said, "Girl, you're doing something very smart. Continue, but be very careful." From that moment on there was a silent agreement between us. He was my protector, I was his hope. In my 14th month, I saw the first American planes over Tokyo from far away. Standing on deck, I watched the sky, as small dots, but they were really American planes. That day I was very excited in my radio broadcast. There was hope in my voice. My fear had diminished because I knew that salvation was approaching. In my last months, I could clearly understand that the war was turning in favor of the United States. Japanese officials were becoming more tense. They were walking with quick steps in the corridors, constantly holding meetings. Commander Sato no longer came to my room. Other officers were dealing with me. These officers were harsher, but I had not lost hope anymore. Every passing day I could hear the sound of American planes more clearly. In July 1945, the bombardments intensified. At nights we heard siren sounds, felt explosions from far away. Samuel told me they're very close now, Mary, be patient. And every morning when I woke up, I hoped that day could be the day of salvation. In August 1945, that unforgotten morning came. I heard the sound of American planes. They were flying over Tokyo and no one could stop them anymore. That day in my radio broadcast, I sat in front of the microphone for the last time. There was no longer fear in my voice. There was only hope. When American rescue teams found me, 18 months of captivity had come to an end. I had lost weight, my hair had fallen out, my hands were trembling. But there was pride in my eyes. Because I knew that during those dark days, I had served my homeland with my voice.
Mary Nakamura's story shows how courage can emerge in unexpected forms during wartime. A young woman sitting behind a radio microphone served her homeland by turning the enemy's propaganda weapon around. Should we today think about how much sacrifice we can make to protect our freedom? This story reminds us of the power of never losing hope in every difficulty and doing what is right.